And welcome to my channel. This is my vinyl channel, talking about my vinyl albums with a bit of chit chat added in. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who watched my very first video. Thanks for your comments, they were much appreciated, and thanks for those of you who have followed me. It's very, very kind of you. So today it's just more of the same, really. I'm going to try and keep it a wee bit shorter. Certainly I'd like to talk about one of the more unusual albums in my collection, and one or two others that a couple I've always had, one or two that I've bought because friends had them recently. So the first album I want to show today is an album by a band called The Shining Levels. This is it here. It's called The Gallows Pole. This is a 2019 album, and what's unusual about this is a musical album that is the soundtrack to a book, and the book is this book here by Benjamin Myers called The Gallows Pole, and I'm lucky enough to have a signed copy of it by Ben Myers there. The book is inspired by the real-life events of the 18th century Yorkshire criminal gang, the Cragvale Coiners, who operated in the Calder Valley, and what they were doing was basically clipping coins, it was called. So they were taking coins and clipping them, reforging coins, and basically distributing them to the poor. At that point in the Calder Valley down in Yorkshire, they were seen as, it was an area bereft, really, cut apart from the rest of of England and the crown and the state. So they had their own lifestyle there in their own ways, but the rich started to come in and encroach by building big mills in the valley, and it was beginning to take away their lifestyle. And the poor were having to head into these big factories. So the coiners were actually redistributing the wealth with these forgeries so that people didn't have to do that. And it was very much putting the fingers up at the crown and the state at the time. So the book's about that. It's incredibly well written. Historical fiction, you might call it. These were real people, but they're very well described. It's a lovely book about the landscapes as well. The landscapes of the Calder Valley and the moors are particularly well done here. And there's a kind of there's a mythical folk sort of story running through it as well, I think. Yeah, it's very, very good. So that's the book. The music itself is obviously inspired by that. It's a folk prog, would you say? It's a kind of prog rock sort of album. The musicians are all from around that area, and they all grew up contemporary with the author as well. So it fits really well with the book. I bought the book when I went down to Halifax last year. And it was actually the librarian there said, well, would you like the music that goes with this? She said, read the book first and then listen to the album, which I did do. And I have to say, this is an impressive album. It's incredibly good music. The music explores the themes of the book. There's the potency and mystery of remote rural landscapes, the changing seasons, there's shifting fortunes. It's about poverty versus wealth, with that folklore in behind it. It's a really, really clever album, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's something very ethereal running through this. It's the back cover here, and it's on actually the Ultra label, which is a label I hadn't come across before. So if I just find the slide there, there we are. There we are. If I hold it up the right way, which would be helpful for everyone. What are we doing here? My goodness. And there we are. It's on Ultra, the Ultra label. So, as I say, the book itself is now out in the States and Canada. It won the Walter Scott Prize for Literature, I think it was, when it came out. And it's very much turned into a bit of a cult classic. So if you can get your hands on this, I would highly recommend it. and certainly the music that goes with it is incredibly good. So give it a go. So that's my first album to show today, is the Shining Levels there. The next album that I want to show is an old classic. It's one that I didn't have, but I bought recently an original pressing of this, and it is Whitesnake's 1981 album, Come and Get It. This was their fourth studio album, and to my mind still actually has that classic lineup. David Coverdale, John Lord, Bernie Marsden, Mickey Moody, Neil Murray, and Ian Pace is on the drums there. It's a good album. It was probably their highest charting release, actually. This got to #2 in the British charts and was kept off #1 by Adam and the Ants, as it was at the time. It has one of probably their best known singles on it as well, which is Don't Break My Heart Again, which made it to #17 in the singles charts, but a classic song, one I really like. So in the UK, this was on the Liberty Sunburst, and you'll see here it came in a picture sleeve, and there's Coverdale on that side with the lyrics. And if we take it out here, you'll see the Liberty Sunburst label, and there we are. And that's the UK copy, but I actually have two copies of this. I have the American 1981 pressing as well. And the reason I want to show you this one is there are differences in the covers. So if you look closely at the UK one, and I suppose this is about society and what people think is right and wrong, I suppose. So if you look at the closely at the snake on the British one, you'll see there a rather suggestive opening on its tongue. However, if you look at the US pressing, that is not there at all. So the Americans did not find it acceptable to have the tongue on this cover, so it was changed for the US market. Obviously, again, in the US market, it came out on a different label, and it came out on Mirage, which is part of the Atlantic Group, and there is the Mirage label there. And another thing, it didn't have the picture inner, and it just came with this sort of khaki cover which says the Atlantic Group on it. So differences there and across the pond and just in the covers. Yeah, so interesting. So the next one to show you is an old favourite of mine, and one that again I didn't own but I bought recently. And again, a kind of controversial cover on this album as well. This is the 1975 UFO album, the British rock band UFO, and the album called Force It. This was their fourth album with the classic lineup. It was Phil Mogg, Andy Parker, Pete Way, and Michael Schenker on guitar. There was no keyboard player in the band at this point, although this is the first album that actually has some keyboards in it, and they used a session musician called Chick Churchill, I think his name was. And yeah, it's a great album. There's some really good stuff on it. Let It Roll, Shoot Shoot, Mother Mary. Some really good stuff. Really good stuff on this. It's a very controversial cover. In 1975, when this came out, it was pretty much edging towards the edge of British decency laws at that time. There was great controversy about the figures on this cover. Not just who they were, but also what was their gender. Were they both males? Was it a male female? Was it two females? And that controversy raged for years, to be quite honest. And in fact, in the States and quite a few other countries, these figures are translucent. You can't actually really see the figures on the cover. The Americans just wouldn't go for that at all as an album cover concept. So after much debate over many years, it came to light that the figures the figures in here are Genesis P. Orridge and Cozy Fanny Tutti of the influential industrial band Throbbing Gristle. And actually, just last week, that Genesis P. Orridge passed away. So I suppose there's a bit of poignancy about showing this album cover at the time. There's also a rather poor pun in the album cover as well. So you can see all around are lots and lots of taps, or faucets, if you want to call them that. And the album is called Faucet. It was a bit of a poor man's pun, really, there. The album is on Chrysalis. It's on the green Chrysalis label, the earlier Chrysalis label, and there we are there. But if you've never really came across UFO, that 75 to 79, 80 a band are incredibly good. They're well worth a listen to. One of my go-tos when it comes to British rock music, it has to be said. So my next album up is a mini LP. And I suppose it's a wee bit out there, a wee bit different as well. And this album is Brian May and Friends. So it's a mini LP, and it's called the Starfleet Project, and it's based on the kids TV series that was aired in the UK called Starfleet, and it was his son that put him on to this. I think it's a Japanese actually program, and there's a groovy spaceship on the back there from the series. His friends on this album are Eddie Van Halen, Alan Grazier from Rio Speedwagon, Phil Chen, who is a session bassist with Jeff Beck, and Fred Mandel, who played keyboards on quite a lot of Queen's stuff itself. It was never actually meant for release. So what's on here is kind of the original tapes, to be honest. So it's a really raw sound, really quite powerful. And what's lovely about this is the guitar breaks, the difference between the guitar sound of Eddie Van Halen and Brian May, and you can just pick it up all the time. It's really, really good. So there's the Starfleet song itself, and then after that there's a song called Let Me Out. And that was an unreleased Brian May track at the time. And towards the end, you can actually hear Eddie Van Halen break his top string on this, and then he plays the rest of the song with 5 strings. And you can actually hear it going ping. This was really quite interesting. Again, this one came with a picture sleeve, and here we are. And it's EMI label. Terrible for showing these upside down, and there we are on EMI, and the picture sleeve has pictures of Eddie Van Halen and the rest of the guys, and their guitars there, and the Starfleet Project, etc. On the other side. The third, it's 2 songs on side 1, 1 song on side 2, which is a big song called Blues Breaker, and that's a tribute to Eric Clapton, because both May and Eddie Van Halen were massive fans. If you get a chance to listen to this, it is really good, and I think if you're a Van Halen fan at all, this is something that you'd appreciate. There's some really good stuff from Eddie Van Halen on here, it has to be said. So the last album to talk about today, these were, the Starfleet Project was an album I used to have and then I've lost across the way, so that's one that I've just rebought. And the last one to show you is basically one that I have always had. So I bought this when I was about 12 or 13 and probably thought it was a heavy metal album just from the cover. And it is Molly Hatchet's Flirting with Disaster. So you can understand, looking at this, why you would think this is a metal band. The cover is by Frank Frazetta. It's called Dark Kingdom, and he was a very famous fantasy artist, and he actually did quite a few of their albums, their album covers. But of course, they're not a metal band, they're a southern rock band from Jacksonville, I believe, and this was their second album in 1979, and it's also their best-selling album. And although when I got it home, I went, what is this? I really, really enjoyed it and haven't played it a long time. And when I got my when I got my new record deck last year, I was playing it, and I have to say I was thoroughly taken with it. Yeah, it's good. There was two singles from it, Flirting with Disaster itself, which is probably their best known song, and Whiskey Man, which is also really quite good. And on the back cover there is a picture of the band, and it comes with a inner with the lyrics, just red with the lyrics, and they're on Epic, and there is the Epic label there in the centre. So that's me for the day. I'm going to try and keep these to about 15 minutes. I think I went 10 minutes over last week, it's a wee bit too much. So again, thanks to everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. It'd be great to see your comments down below again. I'm away to watch this back and see how good or bad or indifferent this whole recording might be. But stay safe to everyone, look after yourselves, and I'll hope to do another video soon. Cheers!